It looks like we are headed for another government shutdown after Senate Democrats this afternoon rejected a partisan bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security. Now, if you remember, they voted a couple of weeks ago to fund the rest of the government, but only agreed to a short-term extension in funding for the Department of Homeland Security, while Democrats and Republicans negotiated new accountability measures for ICE in the wake of the killing of Alex Preddy. Now, it's pretty clear at this point that Republicans thought that they could just run out the clock on this and that the American people would forget about ICE's abuses of power in Minneapolis and other large cities around the country. And that hasn't worked this time. The backlash has been sustained against the ICE deployment in Minnesota, and Democrats knew that. And so they dug their heels in and said, we need meaningful accountability measures for ICE in order to fund the government. And Republicans haven't taken that seriously, clearly, and that is what has put us in this spot. Now, this hasn't been a day of all bad things. There was some good news this morning that I want to start with, where Tom Homan, the director of ICE, who was sent to Minneapolis, a couple weeks ago to improve the situation there, announced a major drawdown of ICE agents in Minneapolis this morning. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
With that, and success that has been made arresting public safety threats and other priorities since this surge operation began, as well as the unprecedented levels of coordination we have obtained from state officials and local law enforcement, I have proposed, and President Trump has concurred, that this surge operation conclude. A significant drawdown has already been underway this week and will continue through the next week.
Now, this is all political theater for Donald Trump, obviously. They sent Homan there. You could tell they were only going to have him there for a little bit just so they could claim that they'd improved the situation a lot, and then that was what they were going to be able to use to justify the drawdown in troops. Obviously, that's not true. We have seen in videos the past couple of weeks, even since the shooting of Alex Preddy, that ICE continued to use overly aggressive, questionably illegal, bad tactics against people on the ground in Minneapolis. We saw them pulling their guns on citizens for filming them and pointing them in their cars, doing aggressive pullovers in their vehicles of Minneapolis, residents. Things were not changing. The stuff on the ground was still overly aggressive, but they needed a way for the president to chalk this up as a win and an improvement, so it didn't look like they were fleeing Minneapolis with their tail between their legs. And that's what they're doing here. The sustained backlash has gone on longer than this administration thought possible, and this really did end up being a watershed moment for the country, putting their foot down and saying this is bullshit. And look, we've talked about this before. What Democrats are asking for in this bill for new ICE accountability measures is simple stuff. Judicial warrants before entering people's homes and breaking down their doors and arresting them. No masks so they can hide behind that while they use violent tactics on people. Mandatory body cameras. Clear use of force guidelines and standards in terms of when an officer is allowed to pull out their gun on a person. Hint, it's not when they have their cell phone out and are filming people. And so I think the complete Republican stonewalling is what has become so frustrating to people in this situation, where not only are Republicans not agreeing to this, they can't even agree to something as basic as a simple investigation, an independent investigation into the killing of Alex Preddy, which, as we've all seen, hopefully, the video by now, was a clear violation of the law. Or something serious enough where it needs to be investigated independently. And Senator Andy Kim did an interview this afternoon where he talks about that frustration around the lack of accountability there. Let's take a look.
Over 3,000 federal agents were there, and when you put it into perspective, that is over twice the number of Minnesota State Police, Minneapolis Police, St. Paul Police combined. So, this was an occupation of an American state, of an American city. And going forward, that damage has been done, regardless of what Tom Homan announced today. when this administration, and I asked this directly to the ICE head of ICE, they are still pushing forward without an actual independent investigation. Without an independent investigation that is going into this and going to have what we need for accountability, Minnesota is not going to be able to move on. The American people are not going to be able to move on. Instead, we're just going to have what we've.
And look, even moderate Democrat senators in this situation are saying, we've drawn a line in the sand at this point. Senator Jeanne Shaheen basically said, we are not going to have Americans killed in the streets and not have any form of accountability around it. And the American people are firmly behind this at this point. And Republicans just don't seem to get it. They are, every time the Democrats, including what happened in the fall with the shutdown around healthcare, Republicans keep saying, well, this is all theater and symbolism. And it's like, and it's not. There are clear policy asks here in terms of what Democrats need to see in order to fund the Department of Homeland Security. And that doesn't seem to matter for, Republican senators like Ashley Moody, who went on, was, being interviewed by Fox this afternoon and kept pushing this idea that Democrats are somehow just shutting down the government for fun. Let's take a look.
The Democrats care more about creating a narrative by forcing a shutdown than they do about actually doing their jobs for the American people that sent us here.
This is doing their job. Americans want to feel safe in their own cities. We don't live in an authoritarian dictatorship where citizens can just get shot for filming a federal officer. This is the job people were sent to do. And I think, unfortunately, Democrats would like to be focusing on other things, but safety comes first. And if they don't feel safe in their cities, then how do you focus on anything else? And so I think Ashley Moody saying, well, this isn't what we're sent here to do. That's BS. Let's get this done so we can maybe focus on other issues like the cost of living crisis that this administration has shown absolutely no interest in tackling whatsoever. So even if all of this stuff gets accomplished and the Democrats get what they want out of these, DHS funding negotiations, we'll be on to some other horrific thing tomorrow because the administration needs to keep distracting from the fact that they have no real plans to improve the lives of the American people. And on top of all of this, heading into, the midterm elections, we still see these horrifying potential scenarios being entertained by members of the GOP. We see it. We've seen stuff from obviously Steve Bannon, who talked last week about, or a couple weeks ago, about deploying ICE to polling places, and then several times since then, as administration officials have been asked, including an ICE director during a Senate hearing today, was asked by Alyssa Slotkin, will you refuse an order if the president tries to send ICE to polling places? And he was yet again wishy-washy about it, like Caroline Leavitt was, like the president has been, like Stephen Miller has been, like several members of the administration have been. And not only have they been wishy-washy about it, this afternoon we had a Republican congressman actively ask out loud, why shouldn't we put ICE at polling places? Let's take a look.
Going back to the demands that I believe the Democrats are making, it includes needing a warrant to enter private property, banning agents from wearing masks, having badges, having body cameras, prohibiting action at schools, hospitals, and churches. What's the objection to these matters, which is the issue that could result in a shutdown?
Why should you ban ICE from being at polling places? Because illegals aren't supposed to vote in this America. I mean, it does not make sense, the requests that they're happening. Enforce the rule of law, and that's what President Trump is doing. Apparently, Democrats don't like the rule of law. If they don't like the rule of law, they need to change it. They have never changed it, but they're complaining now.
So we now have sitting members of Congress asking out loud why they can't do things that were called alarmist months ago when people were nervous about it, or a year ago when people said, this is what Donald Trump is teeing up with these deployments of federal troops into cities, especially in swing states. And everybody said, that's over the top. You're overreacting. Democrats were called, panickers. Now we have people saying it out loud. Why can't we do that? And we better pay attention to them. Look, shutdowns are risky and they're disruptive and nobody wants them. But this is the only leverage Democrats have right now. And unfortunately, in this moment, and hopefully it doesn't last long, and hopefully Republicans realize that Democrats are serious about this. This is every single issue is just becoming a fight for democracy. And that stuff has to happen before we can get to the kitchen table issues that I know so many of us and so many Democrats are dying to work through. So the American people can actually believe that their government is capable of helping them again. That's it for me today. If you liked what you saw in this video, throw a like on it. Follow the Demwins Media YouTube channel. Follow me at buildingthebench.substack.com. And we will keep bringing you the news as you need to see it. Thanks for watching.